Hello and welcome to the Ellen Made Book Club and a little book haul. I got some books, most of them are new from the bookstore. I ordered a few from Blackwell's, which I, usually try to wait until I have a bunch and then I can order them and then they can all arrive in the same package. That didn't happen because they just sent it in like 4 or 5 different packages, but anyways, they're all here now and I want to show you what I found. I also bought a few books in our local bookstores and I also found a couple on sale at the library. So yeah, let me show you what I got. I don't really know where to start. I don't really have a lot of rhyme or reason to this. Here's one. I'll just do whatever comes up and we'll open some packages in a second. I did open a couple of packages from Blackwell's just because I needed to see which books had arrived and which hadn't. One of them is Women Talking by Miriam Toews, which is a book that I have been wanting to read for a long while now. This is on my list of 25 books to read in 2025, so I figured I should own a copy because sometimes I try to get stuff from the library and I just get stressed out by the deadline of having to return it. So I would rather have this on my shelf and I'm very happy that I do now. This is about a group of Mennonite women who come together and have a meeting, and since they are not sort of allowed to read or write, they have a man who is taking the minutes from this meeting that they're having about their life situation and what's going on. And yeah, that's really all I know about it. I think it takes place in Bolivia, but the author is Canadian. I just have seen this around and I'm very curious about it. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to reading this, hopefully very soon. The next book I found at a local bookstore, and that is Intimacies by Kitamura. And this is an author who I think is longlisted for the Booker Prize, if I'm not mistaken, or she has a book called Audition that I have seen been mentioned for a prize. I think it's the Booker Prize. Anyways, I thought that the premise for this sounded really interesting. It says an interpreter has come to The Hague to escape New York and work at the International Court. So already we have like languages and interpretation, and that just sounds interesting to me. A woman of many languages and identities, she's looking for a place to finally call home, and she's drawn into simmering personal dramas. Her lover is separated from his wife, but still entangled in his marriage. Her friend Jana witnesses a seemingly random act of violence, a crime the interpreter becomes increasingly obsessed with as she befriends the victim's sister. That was enough for me to be intrigued. I like the setting. It sounds like it's sort of political and language and crime, and there's a victim that she befriends, and I don't know, it just sounds really good, really good. It says it's a gripping read and a chilling consideration of what's involved when we choose to ignore the things we don't want to see, let alone understand. Yeah, it just sounds really interesting and intriguing and something that I would like. Sounds complex and smart, and I want to read it. It's only about 220 pages, so perfect. Oh, do I always have to drop my books? That's where we put that. Okay. The next one I also bought in a local bookstore, and this is Everything You Ever Wanted by Louisa Sauma. And this one I have picked up a couple of times and then put back, and then I come back and I pick it up and I put it back because like the cover looks like something I would enjoy, but then I think it's a bit of a sci-fi story, and maybe this isn't for me, but it also has like work-life satire, and I don't know, I just think the premise sounds really fun. It says, you wake up, you go to work, you have strategy meetings about how to use hashtags. After work, you get so blackout drunk you can't remember the circumstances that have led you to waking up next to your colleague. The next day you stay in bed, scrolling through your social media feeds and wondering why everyone else seems to be achieving so much. Then you hear about Life on Nyx, a program that offers a chance to move to another planet and start a new, meaningful way of life. But there's a caveat. If you go, you can never come back. It sounds interesting. It sounds like it has sort of a lightheartedness about everyday social media life, and also like some, the meaning of life and like existential questions, and also a bit of sci-fi. Yeah, it sounds like a good time to me. Okay, should we open a package? I don't know which book is in which packet, so let's just start with this one and see what's inside. This is Every Version of You by Grace Chan. This one has a bit of a similar vibe. It's also a bit sci-fi and technology and the meaning of life kind of thing, and also a very pretty cover. This one is set in 2080 in Australia, and it follows Toews and her partner Navin. They spend most of their time inside an immersive consumerist virtual reality called Gaia. They log on, go to work, socialize, and even eat in this digital utopia. Meanwhile, their aging bodies lie suspended in pods inside cramped apartments. Across the city, in the abandoned real world, Toews' mother remains stubbornly offline, dwindling away between hospital visits and memories of her earlier life in Malaysia. When a new technology is developed to permanently upload a human brain to Gaia, Toews must decide what is most important, a digital future or an authentic past. That sounds really interesting to me. I'm curious about like the relationship between her and her mother and how she chooses to prioritize and how that question is sort of dealt with. This book was longlisted for the Stella Prize, and it says that it is a deeply tender story of love and the immigrant experience. It's stunning and spellbinding and unpicks the ties between life and technology to ask what truly makes us human and what in our world is worth preserving. Yeah, I think that sounds really, really great. Then I have a couple of books that I found at the library, which were incredibly cheap. They sold them for 2 crowns, like 2 Swedish crowns each. So I guess that's like 20 cents. One of them I have been wanting to read in English, but I found the Swedish translation, and that is Open Water by Caleb Asuma Nelson. This is set in London, and it follows 2 Black British people, and I think it's about their relationship and race and masculinity and just, you know, what it's like for a Black person in Britain. And I've heard really good things about this book, and I'm very excited to have it. Yeah, this one is in really good condition too, and for 20 cents, like, I'm not gonna pass that up. It is a hardcover as well. And then the other book that I bought at the library is Riot Days by Maria Aliochina, which if you see the cover, you know what group this is about. I think it's a memoir or like just the experience of being in this group, whose name I don't want to say on the internet, and then the time in prison. They are trying to do things in Russia that are not allowed there or weren't allowed there, probably still aren't. I just think that sounds really interesting. I know very little about this group, but I'm very curious to read this. And for 20 cents, I'm picking this up. Okay, should we open another package? Let's do this one. Okay, we get a little sneak peek. This is Elena Knows by Claudia Pinheiro, and I am really interested to read this. Now a Netflix movie? I didn't know that. I also didn't need there to be a sticker about that on my book, but it's kind of discreet for a Netflix sticker, so fine. It is translated by Frances Riddle. I've heard lots of great things about this book. It's also not very long, but I mostly think that this is a good entry point to this author. It's an Argentinian author who writes crime with like social commentary, I've heard great things. This one is a little bit bent, which is a shame, but that's fine. It's also got a bunch of like prizes that it's won listed on the first page. This follows Elena, who is a mother, and her daughter Rita is found dead, and the police have ruled it to be a suicide, but Elena knows differently and is convinced that something else has happened, and so she sets out on a journey to find out what happened. And it says it takes place in a single day, and somehow through that journey we get some insights into what has happened in the past and what's going on. And yeah, I'm really excited to read this one. If not this year, then definitely next year. Another book that arrived from Blackwell's that I've already opened the packet is We Love You Bunny by Mona Awad, which is the sequel to Bunny by the same author. And I think that it's from the bunny's perspective. I've tried very hard not to learn what this is about. The only thing I know is that it's from the bunny's perspective and there's a book, and that's all I want to know. And yeah, I'm very excited to get to this. I think I have the audiobook as well on my audiobook app, so I might listen to that if it's good and read this at the same time. But yeah, I'm very excited for this one. Bunny was a 5-star for me, so very happy to have this. I'm a little sad that they don't match. If I love this one, maybe I will switch it out for one that is the same size. But anyways, I like this format of book as well. So yeah, very happy to have this. This is James by Percival Everett, finally. I started listening to the audiobook of this, and I didn't know because I didn't have a physical book to like flip through, but the start of the book looks like this. Like there's different songs, and the audiobook just reads this out, and they're very like old sounding, like the language is very, they're songs. So I was like, if this is what the book is like, I'm not going to understand anything. And I didn't know how long it was going to go on for because I didn't have, the pages to flip through. But then once I got a copy from the library, I saw that like that's not what the whole book is. It's just these, introduction songs. But obviously this is a very popular book and everyone wants to read it. And so I didn't have the library copy for very long. And I've seen this in the stores in Sweden too, but they all have this, the front cover that is like too short. So it's like a flappity thing on the side here, which I hate. I decided to order a copy from Blackwell's instead because I wanted this cover and I wanted the front cover to cover the whole front concept. But yeah, I'm very excited to read this one finally. It's a retelling or like a reimagining of Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain, but following James. I've seen so many different people on booktube read this, and like no matter what they usually read, like if they are usually reading romance and fantasy, or if they read historical fiction or sci-fi or nonfiction, like everyone just seems to love this book. And regardless of if you've read Huck Finn or not, and I haven't, I sort of am familiar with the concept of it, but I've just read like excerpts, I think, in school. Everyone seems to love it, so I hope that I will too. The next book I bought in a local bookstore, and that is Never the Wind by Francesco Dimitri, who I think is an Italian author. I think it's the first book that he has written in English. I think he has had other books translated, but anyways, this is a book that I got because it's been compared to Susanna Clarke's book, and it's like, if you like Piranesi, maybe you will like this one. And I loved Piranesi, and I'm always, on the lookout for books that are sort of in the similar vein. This one sounds like it might be. It's set in 1996, and we follow Luca, who is 13 years old and has been completely blind for 8 months. And then his family moves to this southern Italian farmhouse that they dream of turning into a hotel. And then Luca meets Ada, who takes him out to explore the rocky fields and empty beaches, but their families seem to have some kind of a grudge between them, and so that's an obstacle. And then Luca is preyed upon by the feral wanderer who walks the vineyards of his home. As his family starts to crack at the seams, Luca and Ada have to navigate new lands and old rivalries to uncover the ancient truths spoken as whispers on the wind. It sounds like my kind of magic, like something a bit just sort of ethereal and weird, like mysterious, and a bit, suspenseful, but also like sort of heartwarming. I don't know. I have very high hopes for this book, and I hope that it's good. I think that's what it means to have high hopes, that you hope that it's good, but never mind. Okay, so then we have this big packet, and let's see what's inside. In this, I think we should have 2 books. The first one is this one, and this also has a character that is blind. This is Mrs. Gulliver by Valerie Martin, and it says, 19 years old, beautiful and blind since birth, Carita has taken control of her future, seeking work at Mrs. Gulliver's exclusive brothel. On one hot night, she meets Ian Drohan, a wealthy young idealist who falls madly in love with her and is determined to be her savior. But does Carita need saving? A delightful entanglement of star-crossed lovers and gangsters amid a tropical paradise. Mrs. Gulliver is an entertaining escapade of 2 women forging their place in the world. I just think the cover looks like a book that I would enjoy, and I think the premise sounds interesting. I like the idea of a woman who, you know, maybe doesn't need to be saved just because a man thinks she does. And yeah, I'm just very curious about it. So I'm looking forward to this one. This was also one that I was very intrigued by the cover. This is Fruit of the Dead by Rachel Lyon. The quote on the front says, Ancient Greece meets Succession by way of Emma Cline. That sounds like a good mix in my head. I haven't read anything by Emma Cline, but just like sort of have an idea of what that would mean for this mixture. I don't know. I think this follows a mother and her daughter, who's like 18 years old, and the daughter is called Corey, and she is working at like a summer camp, and one of the kids' dads makes her an offer, and so she takes off with this like magnetic CEO of a pharmaceutical company to some kind of private island in Europe, I think, and then her mother sort of has to save her from there, and it's like a reinvention of the story of Persephone and Demeter, and I don't know, it just sounds like a cool mix with like a bit of mythology and a bit of a modern day sort of young woman being taken off with this rich guy, and her mother is trying to like save her from that situation. And again, a beautiful cover. I just it looks like a book for me, so I decided to get it. I think those are all of the books that I have bought. I also have a couple from the library that I think are really interesting. The first one is Reservoir Bitches by Dalia de la Cerda, which is a short story collection written by a Mexican author, and it's about women in Mexico. And I think that the short stories are interlinked somehow, and they sort of weave together. And this was recommended by Caitlin at Spill the Reads. And then I have Endling by Maria Riva, who is a Ukrainian-Canadian author, and this is set in Ukraine and follows a woman who is trying to do some good for nature, environment, something, and specifically some kind of a snail species that she's trying to save. But to fund her research, she takes part in this like romance tours, and you know, again, men come there and have certain expectations, and they might not be very accurate. That's really all I know. I've seen this book around everywhere. I think it was also longlisted for the Booker Prize. Some people love it and some people don't, but I think it sounds very interesting and like a book that I would enjoy. So I need to get to this within 2 weeks, I think, before I have to return it. So very excited. And then I also have The Listeners by Maggie Stiefvater. I need to look up how to say this author's name. This is historical fiction, I think, and it's the first book that this author has written for adult readers, and this is set in 1942 in the wild Appalachian Mountains in a hotel. 300 enemy diplomats and Nazi sympathizers arrive to their hotel, and June must play host. And I think that sounds really interesting. I think there's a bit of a mystery in here and maybe also some magical realism. And yeah, just that like dilemma of having a hotel and having to cater to guests, and the guests being people that you don't agree with. I think that sounds like a really interesting premise. And I didn't really connect the dots about this author. I was just intrigued by the premise, and then I was like, oh, that's that author. Because I think a lot of people have loved her previous works that are more like young adult books and are maybe a bit surprised about the premise for this book. But I just found the premise interesting, and so I wanted to read it for that reason, and then I realized who the author was. So hopefully I will have a good time with it, regardless of other people's experience with it. But yeah, we'll see. So yeah, that's my stack of new books, and I'm very excited for all of them. I'm very happy to have them. I'm probably gonna read We Love You Bunny by Mona Awad first out of these. And I'm also hoping to get to Never the Wind pretty soon. I feel like that's a fall time read. Women Talking I also want to read this year. Oh my goodness, I'm gonna drop these. And then there are some that are more like for fun. Others like Elena Knows and James I definitely want to read next year, if not this year. I'm very happy with my little haul. I hope you enjoyed it and maybe found some new titles that you hadn't heard of before, or books that sounded interesting to you. If so, please let me know in the comments. And yeah, if there's one that you're specifically curious about, maybe I can prioritize that one. And yeah, thank you so much for watching. I hope you're having a fantastic day, and I will see you in the next one.